Hello, my name is Adam Walker. I'm a PhD student in English literature at Harvard University, and I'd like to invite you to a free online course on Milton's Paradise Lost, hosted with the Antrim Literature Project. This course will take place next year in spring 2024, beginning in February. When it comes to teaching literature, I believe that it's important not to just study ideas, but also language itself. Helen Vendler said that students should learn to love not just Shakespeare's ideas or characters, but also Shakespeare's language, not just Keats's sentiments, but also Keats's English. And so in this course in Paradise Lost, we'll be focusing primarily upon the language of poetry itself and the meaning in John Milton's verse. That's why this free online course is titled Paradise Lost in Slow Motion. And the aim is to help students encounter or re-encounter John Milton's Paradise Lost through close reading, conversation, and community. We'll read one book of Paradise Lost a week, and we'll complete the entire epic, the entire 12-book epic, in one semester. This will give us ample time to read slowly, to read aloud, to read privately, and publicly together in our meetings, and to savor the language of John Milton's verse. So we'll be encouraging slow, careful, deliberate, attentive, even contemplative readings of John Milton's verse. Unlike many courses on Paradise Lost at the universities, this course will not have an overarching theoretical approach. We won't be reading Paradise Lost as theology, for example. We will not be reading it as versified scripture, or as history, or as biography, or as anthropology, or gender studies. All of these important topics will sometimes arise out of the text itself, and we'll be discussing some of these ideas. But this course does not center its approach to Paradise Lost through any theoretical concern. So anyone, regardless of age, background, or education, is warmly welcomed to this course. I will say that the only thing required is a basic competency with the English language. The meeting will roughly run about 90 minutes long. I'll give a 30-minute close reading lecture, followed by 15 minutes of questions and answers in which we discuss the themes and the passage that was central to my lecture. And then we'll move into a 30 to 40-minute discussion and reading of a key passage from the book at hand. And this will give us time to encounter the text together, to re-encounter the text, and to allow questions and issues to arise from our discussion. But why is this called Paradise Lost in Slow Motion? Why have I called it that? For those of you who have seen my previous video on slow reading, you know that the term slow motion, when it comes to reading, goes back to Reuben Brower's 1959 essay, Reading in Slow Motion. Brower describes the process of reading in slow motion as, quote, slowing down the process of reading to observe what is happening in order to attend very closely to the words, their usage, and their meaning, end quote. This process enables one to encounter the text and to cultivate what he calls the complete and agile response to words that is demanded by a good poem. In the description below, I've linked a bibliography of other sources, including Marjorie Garber's essay on reading Shakespeare in slow motion, and also an essay by Paul de Man, in which he talks about teaching close reading. Now, how does slow reading work? Well, let's turn to the very first 5.5 lines of Paradise Lost to see what I mean by this. Here's book 1 of the great epic, Paradise Lost. First 5.5 lines. This is how it begins. Now, T.S. Eliot is right when in his second essay on Milton, he says you really have to get a sense of Milton and evaluate his art paragraphically. You can't just pick apart each line and say, okay, now we understand Milton's syntax. No, you have to get the entire string of sense. The great verse paragraphs themselves have to be taken in all at once to really get the full effect of Milton. But nevertheless, we're just going to start with these first 5 lines to give you an example of what I mean by slow reading and what it will look like for us. One method of slow reading is reading aloud and paying attention to how the sounds sound, the rhythms and the textures. Book 1 begins, of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful seat, sing, heavenly muse. If you notice, the syntax is a bit strung out here. The main verb of this sentence, and by the way, the period continues. This is not the end of the line. I've cut it off here. Here's the main verb, sing. So he's telling the heavenly muse to sing. And here's the main noun. Sing, heavenly muse, of what? Of man's first disobedience. And so he's invoking the muse, classical convention of Greek and Roman epic poetry. We listen to this. A rhythm emerges. Now, Milton's poem is written in blank verse, which means that each line is comprised of 5 iambs, pentameter, iambic pentameter, and an iamb is a unit of metrical foot composed of an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed. Of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste. Each line has 10 syllables roughly, and half of them are stressed in that pattern. Now, we'll notice that the first line, though, trips at the second foot. So if we scan it, we say, of man's first disobedience and the fruit. So here's an iamb, but it immediately collides with this trochee. 2 stressed syllables juxtaposed together there. It trips at what's theologically called the fall, the first disobedience. And so rhythmically, something's going on in the line there that's signaling a disruption. Diens, here's this diphthong comprising 1/2 foot back into iambic meter. So this is what he's telling the heavenly muse to sing about, of man's first disobedience and the fruit. But we have enjambment here. Enjambment is when a line ends without punctuation and we're left with blank space, needing to complete the sense by going to the beginning of the next line. And what this does is, when you're hearing it at least, and the fruit seems like a unit of sense that is attached to this, of man's first disobedience and the fruit. However, it's actually separated here by this comma and enclosed by the comma here. So when we come to the beginning of the second line, here's the second line, of that forbidden tree, that prepositional phrase signals to us that it completes the sense of this. So we have this suspension going on there. Now, we talked about rhythm, which, by the way, we're settling into perfect iambic meter here by the time we get to the second line. Of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste. But notice the textures, too. We have the alliteration, the sound of this F, which is linking through sound to the first obedience. We have the first obedience connected with the fruit. And so in John Milton's poetry, as any good poem really, the logic of and the connections between the words isn't just grammatical, it's also audible. And so the connection here between first and fruit, of course the first disobedience was involving the fruit of what? That forbidden tree. And so we have this triplet of alliteration connecting the mechanism of that disobedience, the fruit of the forbidden tree. So we have that sense enclosed, and then attached to this, really the fruit, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. Again, iambic pentameter, brought death into the world and all our woe. Milton does this a lot. He'll tack on something at the end, an addition. He does this in Sonnet 19. I just did a video on that. In this dark world, and wide into the world, and all our woe. It's different from if he had said, brought death and all our woe into the world. Makes the same sense, but let's go back to the end of line 2 here, because this is interesting, I think. Mortal taste. Mortal going back to the Latin mortalis, which means death or a mortal, a human mortal. But taste, the bodily experience of this fruit, it's of the sense of taste, of course. And so the fruit is, instead of being abstract as an idea, it's being brought home to an experience within the body, which of course is bound up within the fall, the first disobedience itself. sensual or sensuous, whose mortal taste, it's the taste itself which brought death into the world and all our woe. And we have that inevitable conclusion here, as if the breaking in of death and woe into the world is stomping like the approach of some evil brought death into the world and all our woe with loss of Eden. And of course we've got the woe in the world. Joseph Addison actually criticized Milton for these, what he called jingles, I think. But I think the sound connections actually work well for this. You've got the buh and brought and duh as death. And again, it does sound like approaching footsteps. It's something inevitably coming, brought on, hastened in by the taste of that fruit. With loss of Eden, till. Now we have this pause, this caesura here with the comma. Perfect iambic pentameter. Our ears have been, for the last two lines, all in iambic pentameter, so that when we have this pause at Eden, we're expecting a stress. And I believe the stress does significantly fall upon till, because this is the turning point, right in the line, right after that caesura, with the loss of Eden. Till one greater man, again stress, one greater man, stress falling on man, on till, because that till, it's the relenting of all this woe. It's the signaling towards some redemptive hope, which immediately comes in this clause, till one greater man. Of course, talking of Christ, the coming of Christ, who, in Paul's letter of Romans chapter 5, identifies Christ as the second Adam. So it's the second man, second Adam. And we have this suspense. Till what? Till one greater man does what? And we're made to hold the sense until our eyes come to the beginning of the next line. Restore us. Restore us. And regain. But notice what's happened to us in this poem at this point. We're suddenly implicated, brought within the circumference of this poem's mythos. We are no longer talking with scientific and chaste distance of an abstract man, with which the poem began. We can speak, philosophizing of man's first disobedience, general man. But when we come here, when the redemptive turn is introduced and the poem begins to look forward to the coming of Christ, who will undo and restore and regain, then we are implicated. I think that's important here. This inclusive us. We're no longer talking about generalized man, but we're talking about you and me. And that's what Milton's poem is doing. He's crafting a way, a story, by which we can understand ourselves in the world, or at least the context of his own present day. Restore us and regain the blissful seat. We have these blissful S's here. It's called a sibilance, which is then brought to fulfillment in this imperative verb, this prayer, sing, heavenly muse. We have a spondee, two stressed syllables there. Sing, heavenly muse. I think it's back in iambic because we have this syncope here where the E is absent, and so it reads, sing, heavenly muse. So there with that imperative command or the prayer, sing heavenly, we have the two stressed syllables comprising the spondee there, and then settling back into iambic rhythm. So you can see how slowly reading just 5.5 lines of this, you're entering into an experience that's very different from prose. This is a poem. It's a poem that works upon the ear, the eyes, the mind, involving the taste, and involving our own sense of self within the world, because he's trying to bring us into this redemption history that the story is about to unfold for us. So this is an example of close reading. This is partly what I'll be doing in my lectures, introducing the books as we read them, and what we'll be doing together, collaboratively, when we start to read the poem in our discussion section. So I hope you'll join us. If you have any questions, do email me. You can find information about this course at Antrim Literature Project. Subscribe to the newsletter there to stay updated on the things that we offer. And I look forward to reading this poem together with you all and untangling the sense through close reading collaboratively as we encounter this great work. Thanks for watching, and until next time.